Hi there, I'm April Callis-Birchmeier. I'm a certified change management professional, master change management professional, and project management professional. And today I wanted to talk with you about leading through uncertainty. I think that many of us are feeling quite uncertain these days. There's not some of the same um, rhythms and signposts that we normally have. Right now, we've got some political pieces going on that feel very unsettling and make people feel uncertain about um, things like, where they're going to find funding or help for their situations. I think many times in organizational change, we run into these moments where things feel very, very uncertain and we're not quite sure what to do. We're not quite sure where to turn. And we are considered the expert on leading change. And so I think it gives us, all the more pressure about what do we do? How can we lead people when we're knowingly dealing with uncertainty? So I think that there is um, a number of things that we can do, and some of the items, some of the ideas we'll talk about today will be helpful to you, I hope, in leading change in uncertain times, and others may um, be helpful to you even in very certain times. But my goal is to really talk about what it is that we can do as change professionals and project management professionals who must lead in, through, and get people through uncertain times, particularly with the change. So sometimes I think uncertainty comes from the external environment. And one of the areas that we usually are looking to assess when we're thinking about a change initiative is we're looking at external factors that can influence the change. We're looking at the political landscape, we're looking at the financial landscape, we're looking at the societal landscape, we're looking at regulations, and really the community that we're operating in, and we're assessing whether or not there are factors there that are really going to influence our change. And yet sometimes things happen so quickly that we could have done an external factor um, ex- environmental scan, environmental look, and not have seen some of the uncertainty that we're facing. And I have been in a number of situations where there was a great deal of uncertainty around a change. Sometimes it's in the change initiative itself or in the scope of the project. Recently, I was involved with a project that was a government project, and about a third of the way, maybe a quarter of the way through the project, there was all of a sudden great uncertainty around the scope of the project. We had imagined that we had a pretty robust scope, and then we're told that it had all been revised to an MVP, which is um, minimum value, right? The minimum that we can do and still derive value out of it. And so this full-fledged project that was underway quickly became kind of a skeleton crew who was going to do what was minimally viable, and provide the most value that they could with this small crew, with this smaller footprint of a project, which this much smaller scope, because their funding was suddenly different. So that's a lot of uncertainty. And I know that even those who were staying with the project were concerned that their roles would not last um, uh, the entire tenure of the project. They were concerned that they may get to, you know, two-thirds of the project done and suddenly not have that project that they're working on any longer. So there are things that we can do um, when we are uncertain, and there are also um, ways to become more resilient and try to ensure that we're building our resilience skills, and that we are helping those who are going on this change journey with us to make it through this uncertainty. So, one thing that I think is important to recognize and to really do when we're uncertain, when things are suddenly not sure of either the scope of the project or the environmental landscape or our budget or anything, I think a big piece is to work to be as honest as we can be, meaning that if somebody like your sponsor has said you're not allowed to say something, you can't violate that trust, but to be as honest as we can be about not knowing everything. This is a hard place for some leaders. They don't like to be in a situation where they have to admit that they don't know something, that they're not sure. But as humans, we don't always know how things are going to turn out. It's common that we don't really understand what's next or what's coming or how this was going to evolve. And so I think that telling people that we're not sure, while we many leaders may worry that it shows a sign of weakness perhaps, or maybe they're concerned that their stakeholders will feel like they don't know what's going on. I think it's really a human quality to say, I wish I knew so that I could tell you. And I think that when we are honest with each other and we say, boy, this is not exactly what I expected. I'm sure we're going to figure this out, but I don't have the answer. I'm not certain about what's coming right now. I think taking that vulnerable stance and honestly stating that we're sorry that we're not more clear on what's coming and that we wish we had more information to share, and that as soon as we have something we can share, we will. I think that's the best we can do in very uncertain times when we're not completely sure what's going on next. Um, I think there's also some tactics we can do around helping our stakeholders turn their attention to something that we can control, right? So one of the things that I think is very interesting is that if our stakeholders are in a situation where we're telling them we're not sure about the project, we're not sure about the timing, we don't know what's going on, one thing we can be sure about is we can be sure that we want to know more about the stakeholder groups. And I'm not talking about, matrixing, who's resistant, who's not resistant. I think more of a conversation around what the change currently looks like, as far as we know, and what they're going to gain from that, what they may feel like they're losing with that change, and anything that may be making them feel worried or fearful about the change. I think having stakeholder conversations, either in small focus groups, in large virtual sessions, in any sort of format that we can imagine a stakeholder conversation in. I think that stakeholder conversation can go a long way to comforting and providing some sort of clarity for those who are stakeholders and those who are going to be working with the stakeholders to help them move through this change. And I'll tell you, there was a time when I was on a project a number of years ago, about a dozen years ago, that we suddenly had to change the scope of the project. So this was a project that was very large. We had hired more than 100 team members to help with the project. Everybody was on board. We had actually sent most people to training of some sort. And then, without much warning, it was suddenly put on a hold. And part of the project was going to go forward. The smaller part of the project was going to happen. And the larger part of the project was on indefinite hold. And this caused a tremendous amount of uncertainty. especially because people who had been hired in the team roles on the project had given up their jobs, their other job in the organization to come to the project. And so now many of those positions had been backfilled. So that person was thinking, where am I supposed to go? What do I do now? And so we worked very diligently to try to get those folks back in their spots, back in the place where they had been hired from. And if we had anybody that we could not put in back into their previous unit, we were working with the vendor to see if there were some roles that we knew that we had to fill that hadn't been filled yet, and if any of those folks would have the skills and ability to fill those roles. It was devastating to many people. They felt lost because they couldn't go back to where they had been, and they couldn't go forward because their portion of the project was on hold. And this, I think, was a real lesson for many of us who were on that project team and on that change initiative. And I do recall that one of the things that we would talk about was we tried hard to view it in a positive light. That this uncertainty that was so excruciating in some cases, that we could somehow portray it in a positive way. And we started to call it the gift of time. This was giving everyone who had been brought on to the project that was now on hold the gift of time to really spend more thoughtful time looking at their previous role and identifying all of the changes that would be happening when we would finally pick up that piece of the project and move forward. I think it also helped us to tell our teammates that we didn't know exactly when that would occur, picking up the project and moving on with it. So we didn't lie and say that, it would happen in a year, it would happen in 18 months. But one of the things that was helpful, I believe, was the recognition that this was very difficult. Number one, the recognition that this gift of time was an opportunity for all of the folks who had now to either go back to their old roles or find a new role of some sort, to really spend some observation time, really looking at what it was that they were doing in their old roles, so that when the project would go forward with them, they would have a greater sense, a greater understanding and appreciation, and perhaps more powerful observations about what this would mean to everyone in their unit. And the one kind of remarkable thing that occurred was that once, I think we were on hold for about 28 months, and once that hold was lifted, and we'd had a little bit of success, and that hold was lifted, when people came back to be a part of the project, there was a deeper sense of commitment and gratitude around our camaraderie, around our teamwork, around our ability to be together and to work on this project, this change initiative together. So I was interested in what would happen. I was concerned. I thought we might lose all of our qualified, um, wonderfully qualified, hand-chosen team members. And yet we did not lose many of them. I think it was a small percentage who did not come back to the project. And when the folks who did come back rejoined the project and we started to move forward with the bigger initiative, then they had such a vision, such an interest and a vision of how things actually had been working prior to the change, that when we were able to show the change to other organizational leaders, they understood it at a different level than they would have if we had never had this pause, this strange hold. So that was very fascinating. I also think that sometimes leaders feel like they're stuck or trapped with things that they say. And I don't think that's necessarily always the case. We might be sort of, maybe we guaranteed that we'd have something done in 2 years, and then we have to eat our words and say, well, I thought we would be done in 2 years. This is actually going to take 6 years. But I don't think leaders have to be embarrassed or ashamed that they have to eat their words or kind of backtrack. I think it's very important to be human. I think it's important to say, I did guarantee that. I guaranteed we would be done in 2 years. I thought we would be, and I'm wrong. I'm wrong because we changed. Everything was shifted, and that's now not possible. And I think just the ability to say that either we're wrong or something changed, and that's, now what we thought was valid is no longer valid. I think that's a really important piece. I find a lot of people who want to like dig in sometimes and claim that what they said was right, even when it's clear things have shifted. I think it's strong, authentic leadership when you can say, it's not what it was when I said that. And I'm sorry for telling you that this was going to happen at a certain time, and it's obviously not possible. I think people would rather hear an apology that you made a mistake, made an error, said something that you shouldn't have said. Maybe you said something that contradicted your leader and you're caught as a change professional. Don't dig in your heels and say, I'm not going to take that back. I think it's fine to say, I'm I don't know everything. I don't know everything, and I don't even know what I don't know. And while I'm certainly aware of how to help you move through this change, I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Being authentic and human is nerve wracking sometimes. I know a lot of professionals feel like they have to have kind of a tough exterior. And sometimes they call that resilience. But I have to say, I see resilience not as a toughness so much. I see resilience as something that's more flexible, as a recognition that things did not go as expected, and yet we have to move forward. Things did not happen the way that we planned. And now what will we do? Because we can't just stop. And so I think resilience is this more flexible, adaptive sort of stance where we really feel like, it's not what I expected. It's not what I thought was going to happen. This is very different than I believed it would be. And I'm sorry I didn't know that, and I think that having that resilience kind of gives you a flexibility to adapt as opposed to trying to be a little bit like a Teflon, right? Where things just bounce off of you. I think it may not always be seen as strength, but I think resilience is actually strength because it's showing the strength to be able to adapt to changing circumstances whenever they occur, not just, you know, being able to make sure that we move along as scheduled, as planned all the time. I also think about one of the challenges with uncertainty around change is the fact that sometimes our stakeholders start to get a little bit wary. They're not sure that they trust us. And I think there's a number of pieces that impact that. One area that impacts the ability for trust is how frequently we've kind of said something and had to go back and revise what was said. The more frequently that happens, the less our stakeholders will trust us. And that's the way it is. You know, I mean, if we tell them this will never happen again and then it does, they won't trust. So I think the communication has to be, I didn't expect this. I'm sorry this has happened. I can't tell you it won't happen again. We hope that you can try again with us, that you can put your trust in us when we feel like we're ready to move into this direction. I feel like this trust issue sometimes is an area where teams and people sometimes feel a little resistant. They think, why should I believe you now? Why should I believe you now? And I think that's a valid question. Why should they believe you? That's one of the reasons it's so important to be honest and authentic when we're talking about uncertainty. Because if I can tell you honestly, I don't know why you should trust me. I don't know when this is going to happen. I just know that this change initiative has to happen, or this um, implementation will occur at some point in time. I just can't tell you exactly when. I think that's how we can do our best to maintain trust with stakeholders, because I don't blame a stakeholder for not trusting me if I can't keep my word, if I set something out that isn't going to happen, if there's a lot of uncertainty or change around the change itself. I can't expect my stakeholders to automatically just blindly trust me. But my goal in communicating with them as authentically as I can and as humanly as I can is to try to repair that trust and to try to lean into that flexibility, adaptation of resiliency to ensure that people are feeling like they do know what to do next, because they're going to pause or they're going to wait and they're going to withhold judgment. They're going to suspend judgment for a moment while we figure out which end is up. And sometimes that's all we can do. There's so much challenge and so much excitement when you're working on a change initiative. And there are many times when we are thinking positively and we're hoping for the best, and sometimes it doesn't work out to be the best. Sometimes things that we had hoped for don't happen. And yet we still have to move through that uncertainty. We still have to use our flexibility, adapt to this change as best we can, try hard to trust each other, and all try to move in a direction to just know that we are kind of in whatever uncertain time we're in, that we are connected to each other and that we can work on trusting each other. So, if you're thinking about uncertainty in your organization, and you have a lot of change on the horizon. Maybe you have a huge ERP that's going live soon. It's important to think through those pieces of, what would we do if we fall into this place where there's a lot of uncertainty, where there's something has happened with our schedule, our scope, our project, our initiative, our leadership, whatever that is. How would I deal with that uncertainty? What would I do first? And I think having the time and space to think about uncertainty and how to respond is a really important task. It's a really important change task to just think through what if? What if? So, if you are interested in having training for your organization to help people move through uncertainty, if you are interested in becoming a more skilled change practitioner or project management practitioner and ensuring that you have the skills you need to lead people through change, even uncertain change, um, and if you know that your leadership team could really benefit from understanding how organizational change can impact everyone in the organization, please let me know, because I would love to talk with you about doing some training for your organization. If you're a change management or project management professional, come join us for our cohorts where we teach the Ready, Set, Change framework. The Ready framework is what really is helpful in moving people through that change curve and ensuring that people have what they need to adopt the change, even in uncertain times, even when we're not sure how we're going to land. We can still help people move through that change and get them to the place where they need to go to start to adopt the change, realize the benefits of the change, and then be able to move into operations and sustain the change from that point on. So please let me know if you're interested in doing that together. I'd love to work with you, love to help you get your CCMP if you're a change management or project management professional. And I'm looking forward, most of all, to talking with you again about organizational change, about uncertainty, and how we can help each other be more resilient and flexible and adaptable to change in the future. See you next time.